my bit. I'm so glad that you all have been able to stay beyond what is a lunchtime situation where, in essence, after you've had such a sumptuous meal, the desire is to go home and rest. There's a local term for it that I won't use at this time. It might be politically nigger. Yes. I think we have had such a great day. We have had such a great day. I think you all need to applaud the panel. They have done us well. They have done us well in the context of bringing to the fore many, many of the issues that we, in fact, will have to address. We'll have to continue. We'll have to interrogate in an attempt to bring some sense of purpose to what we do in education. Now, my role is a tough one. And I'm going to seek injury time in between. In Parliament, we seek injury time when people read things that shouldn't be read, like that long, long thing about me. That deserved injury time. It was too long. And then I will want a little injury time for reflecting a little bit on Carol Keller. We haven't called his name today, and I'm not even suggesting that we stand up and do the traditional bowing our heads. But I really feel that we should reflect on a great man who has done so much for education. Carol was so selfless that he allowed his own professional development to literally be on hold for so long a time while he did everything else to make the system work. He was a bright, bright man who could describe every concept in education. But even as he described it, he gave you the attributes that went with it. He went into the divergent experiences that went with it. He brought some humor to it. And he would put that little twinkle in his eye and literally make you believe that all that he was saying was definitely true. The night before he passed away, I was looking at a clip on something he did at Lancaster House for Cambridge University, the Cambridge Syndicate, where they were looking at the development of education in some of the countries that they served. And Carol was at his best. Of course, it was odd seeing him in a jacket and tie, but his presentation was so lucid. You can see everybody really involved in what he was saying. So there we've lost a good soul, and I think in reflecting, we ask the grace of God on this family, from whom those blessings that he would have got should flow to them and the others to come. Now, we heard this morning, beginning with Terence, his version of the formal, non-formal, and informal. And he was right on target. He didn't give us the educational terms as we would tend to know it. He said that. But in fact, our business at St. Mary's and elsewhere, and all you principals here, deal with formal education. Non-formal is the one that he spoke, Father Harvey made reference to, and we heard passing references to the yard, the street, the camps, and those places that invariably you may not get some form of certification or credentialing. This too is important. In fact, it has become so important that even as we speak of the panyard now, if you read some of the articles coming out, that they are suggesting that the panyard, which could at this moment can be seen within the non-formal sector, can even become formal as children are credited for what they have learned in the panyard. Martin Daly's is at the forefront of that, and we heard of All Stars this morning, but I wanted to counterpoint that Birdsong is also doing a good job in the East, and so too Exodus. so that more and more the element of non-formal education, especially for our male population, with its open spaces, with its ability to speak, make that mental transfer between dialect and standard English, of course most times staying with the dialect, is available to these young men who engage in a form of what is called intergenerational learning with some of those seasoned handmen who can bring some sense of masculinity to what they are about. The big one now is informal education. They are recognizing that we have not paid enough attention to a lot of what Terence said in the context of the socialization processes and the cultural experiences brought to bear on children over time. I take you quickly to social learning theory. We will not stay at it, but those of us who have studied the work of Bordeaux will understand that every one of us, we bring to the school, we bring to formal education something called our habitus. Our habitus would be those cultural unconscious habit-forming force and practices that would be inculcated in us in the home. We see a lot of that in every profession. A young doctor says to me ever so often, why is this woman coming to me at the last stage of cancer in her breast telling me that the village was telling her all she needed was a rubbing? Because that element of what was the village position on it remained important. The struggle goes on between the fields, those social and cultural spaces where we should be constantly inquiring, seeking to get legitimation and struggling for control between what is taking place in the system, in the fields, as against what is the habitus. This guy says it even better. Habermas. If you go on a website, you can get the work of Habermas quite easily. Habermas says to us, when we come to school, we bring along what is our life world. Our life world are those cultural influences in the home and community that impact on the individual. The system is there. This one looks like a cracked egg because the intention is that invariably it would allow for seepage or seepages of the life world into the system. These are the laws, principles, and conventions developed by society. Habermas says that it is important that the system continually interrogate the life world. Find out what is going on in there, even as they seek to make laws, principles, and conventions. Habermas reminds us that if we do not interrogate that life world, there will come a time when the life world will exist on its own and it will be almost impossible to penetrate it. Sounds familiar? Sounds familiar. Sounds familiar. There are some communities you cannot go in. Courts will not sell you an item because they are not sending anybody in there. TM-Tech is having trouble. They have to be manned by police officers because we have left that life world on its own. Eric Williams had a wonderful opportunity when he met the Meet the People tour in Laventille. And when the dock worker, as he entered his house, took down a chair that he had hanging from the roof because he hadn't enough space to put all his chairs. And Eric Williams saw what was the life world of a man who had already begun to engage in a level of consumerism that he could have not only warned him, but come down to his cabinet and say, we must do a program on how to deal with consumer awareness. Simple example. What are our educational objectives? And I remember Carol even more because we spent a long time on that first section in this book, the white paper that I hope, it's not looking like that now, it's a white paper that we spent a long time. I fought strongly for the word "we believe." There were some people who felt that it sounded too Catholic, but we held on to that term, "we believe." It's there on Roman numeral 15. It's all there. We won't have the time to look at it. But it was an excellent expose of what our educational objectives ought to be. It means too that the lifeblood or habitus must be always examined and reviewed, that the education system must be equitable here, that it must be inclusive, that it must be seamless, that it must be, our colleague from Manzanilla was making the point, that it must be differentiated, and that schooling must be community-based. So with that ethos, we need to look a little bit at this term. Policymakers for years have been confusing equity with equality of opportunity. Equity is not equality of opportunity. Since 1972, Jenks has been saying to us that equity focuses on outcomes and results, and it must be rooted in differences of each individual. Baroness Mary Warnock in the 70s said the same thing. She said, there's nothing really as equal as same. Is equal as fitting and equal as different. And when asked to explain what she meant, she said, think of a race course, curriculum, which is in fact the Latin meaning of the word correre, the race course, or to run a race. And in that race you have standard features, which could be compared to equality of opportunity. You have lanes, you have a starting pistol, you have a space to end, you have all those things going for you that suggest that all is well. But, she says, do we all have the same sets of running shoes? Have we all had a breakfast? Can we all hear the starting, the start pistol? And all those things bring to the fore the differences that people experience, which must be considered when we look at equality. So there's nothing wrong in people asking for affirmation for certain things in society. Of course, affirmation, some of it could be short-term. The government is claiming there is affirmation now on the ethnic imbalance. Some are wondering, is that affirmation short-term? Some of us, like myself, are saying a greater problem is affirmation as it relates to economic differences. Because as we heard today from our colleagues from Northeastern area, which is an area suffering, in need of help. In fact, when I read to you what are the new high-risk areas, Northeastern communities have added 2 new ones. And Sangre Grande could be the new kid on the block to resemble what is happening in Laventille, if we are not careful. So what inequity causes. Inequity blurs the links between policy and practice. It normalizes failure at school. I have some data there that we don't have time to look at. We'll show you that children who are selected for certain schools are selected for schools where there are no opportunities for real success. For the Spain and environment, there are 9 schools that these children are sent to, not chosen. Sent to. Percentage passes in 5 subjects, including maths and English, range from 0 to 26.52%. The best performing school in this district, however, got 97.73%. So see the disparity. Northeastern schools, 5.41% to 17.89%. Best performing school, my sister's school, 59.23. St. George East, 9 schools, ranging from 0 to 21.89%. The best school, 99.05%. St. Patrick and Southeastern, we are saved because of the rural nature of their community. They are way down, ranging from 1.39 to 12.12, best performing 89.9. Southeastern 4 schools, 2.78 to 6.38%. Victoria, the pick of the farm, but you still have schools ranging from 6.96 to 25.53, with the best performing school of that year, 2011, St. Joseph's Convent, with 100% passes, all students getting their passes, and Tobago just as low. I'm going to claim it 3 times. So you have that, and I want to lead you on to the Human Development Index put out by CSO, which shows you that there are other mapping areas. Plus, my colleague Avina has done excellent work with Dr. DeLine and Carol Keller on the geography of underachieving students. Poverty with hunger, poverty and poor living conditions, poverty with hopelessness, and poverty with exploitation. Not poverty by itself. Notice we are not saying that poverty by itself can lead to these things. We are saying that there is always an attachment to it that can in fact work against the individual. Prejudice and bias, crime and violence. This is what we discovered as current indicators among boys of high levels of negative value frames. Chronic anger and rage, low self-esteem, learned helplessness and fatalism, impulsivity, victimhood, hopelessness, insensitivity and disregard for the feeling of others. We heard some of that today. Lowered aspiration. In a world of fantasy, one young man in Tacarigua told me that he hopes to be playing in the NBA in the next 2 years. So you can sense that he obviously was fantasizing at that point. Consumer-orientedness. They want the best shoes, the best what have you. Problems with literacies. Father Harvey's point, reading and communication, numeracy skills, cultural studies, not knowing their country, not knowing fruits, not knowing towns, not knowing spaces. Information literacy, unable to find things in a dictionary, even on the computer as they are trained to surf the net. Financial literacy, we were told the other day that 30% of the population financially illiterate in terms of dealing with money and general life skills. Deficiency in emotional intelligence, and a lack of civility and civic mindedness. And this is even among our upper echelons. So when you meet some of these children in scholarship boards and you ask them, what will you do if you if you were asked to join an NGO, which one will you join and why? They could not tell you because invariably they did not sense it. You'll have to put me on to it. How do boys learn? Boys make greater use of physical space and have a greater need for movement. We heard all of that, Father. Boys are more easily distracted in class, so stimuli need to be varied. A study did at the School of Ed many years ago by one of my curriculum students found that the concentration span among some of our boys coming from the comprehensive school was 7 to 8 minutes. It went up a little 10 to 12 among some of the girls. Now, at that time in the United States, it was as high as 20%. The primary school curriculum is 4/5 language-based, and girls are generally stronger than boys in language. Thus, boys must be encouraged to read what interests them. And at an early age, read aloud to boys. At an early age, develop among boys the love for reading. Talk with and listen to boys. Girls tend to revise more than boys, and there's a connection between revision and homework. So it's obviously there'll be a deficiency there, and as Father Dick said, we need to have a more practical approach to dealing with the boys, even in terms of what we ask them to do as homework. Set clear limits for boys, use alternative forms of punishment for boys, encourage drama and role play in their repertoire. Conceptions of curriculum, we can pass that. We are still at the academic rationalism mode, even though the world is telling us that cognitivism is going to be the answer in the future. Teachers will become learning counselors. Students will have the array of knowledge. Teachers will have to show them to learn how to learn. So curriculum reform further, smooth transition from ECC to primary to secondary levels, a differentiated curriculum, less high-stakes testing. This time we didn't have an SEA exam. We did not have an SEA exam. Too many subject silos, innovative approaches to discipline. There is one called cooperative discipline, where there's a match between the discipline in the home and the school, so that the potency of the discipline is respected. The school calendar and time on task, this dear association went to the minister to tell him it's time we dismantle the existing school calendar. Lio spoke about things we're doing since 50 years ago, some of it 100 years ago. One of it is the school calendar. We are failing to address that. Children don't need 2 months between July and August. You see some of them? Look. Service learning is important. Service learning. Watch out service learning. Some people find it's a nasty word. Some form of national service is necessary to bring people to a greater understanding of self and society. This will take care of some of the needs some people express. Early diagnostic testing of children 0 to 5. Do you know this should have happened in 2007? They had to get only $3 million. United Way was giving $2 million, and they would have set up a ward. They would set up a block at Mount Hope to deal with that. And ministries began to fight with who should get the turf or who should be the one. Health fighting, education, and nothing happened. This should have been in effect already. Remediation, especially in English and maths, mixed ability learning, mix up the children further. That is on the 20% concordat. Maybe you can take some students who get the raw score of 50 to 60%, and not necessarily those who get 80%. Recognition and individualized programs for gifted children. We are losing our gifted children. They are becoming mediocre because we are not drawing them out and working on their sense of giftedness. Cluster academies for boys. Break up your class into smaller groups at St. Mary's. Put 10 or 12 in a separate corner. And in other schools like San Grande, where people have to work, do job shadowing, let them go to work, come back to school, and get their credits. Even as they continue to do both. Mainstreaming in special ed, formal ed, a safe place, a pleasurable place, open spaces, finish it now. Informal ed, the importance of museums, science centers. We could do better with that science center that we have in going up the road. Yes. Parks, physical education, grounds, theaters, art galleries, libraries, zoo, vineyard, etc. Student development centers, they have 2 now for students they want to isolate from the classroom, students who have to leave the classroom for some measure of indiscipline. We need student development centers in every educational district, and so well manned that people can make entry and exit back into the school system when it works. Alternative schooling, Father Harvey spoke about the youth camps. Youth camps education could become one of the ways to go. Correctional institutions for boys. Teacher professionalism, regulation, and greater recognition. I take the point that we need to license our teachers. We need to license our teachers. Even if after the license, 1 5 years, 2 5 years, and then we give them tenure, but people need to feel that their professional worth is measurable. Teaching and standard-based reform, teaching and outcome-based reform, teaching and network-based reform, where some of the better schools that are doing well teaching-wise spend short stints in other schools, helping those schools to upgrade their skills. And then teacher education reform, Roseanne, is vital. You all have to do things differently at your teacher education institution. Finally, leadership should include instructional, moral, managerial, participatory, contingent, and transformational. If you have a principal that cannot do all of these, then you have to change that person. All of those are necessary. But of course, the team can help along the way. And LIO, parent-teacher conferencing is important. St. Mary's, you should have at least 3 to 4 a year, and not only saying hello to the parents, but having the child's full portfolio where discussion is carried on with each child, so that both individuals can enter what Joseph Featherstone called the theater of learning. His school at theater. Parent education, parent involvement in the learning process, cooperative discipline. Somebody spoke about this but didn't call the term. It's written by a guy named Jeans. Subtle expectations at home. Subtly tell the children what you want of them. Very subtly. Put little things in place so they can sense the desire that you may have. A guy, Mohandas Williams of Laventille, who got an excellent PhD from Columbia University, claimed he heard the gunshot every night. But they said to him that he had to be great. Home visitation, we have to start going back to the home. And finally, some of the references. This is the injury time. Injury time. Please see Michael Gurian's work on this. Please see Michael Gurian's. Sorry, Father.
Dr. Bernard, I think you owe me a long answer.